Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Matt Nightingale. I'm the Executive Director of Common Sanctuary, and it's my pleasure to welcome Derek Webb to this conversation. We're going to be talking about his new album. It's called Survival Songs, and I've been listening to it pretty much nonstop for several weeks now. So, Derek, I just wanted to say thanks for joining me today for this conversation. I wrote down some of the ways that I've been kind of following you for like 25, I can't believe it, for many
I
years
know.
now.
I know it's
I started
crazy.
listening to the first Caedmon's Call album back in 1997. I
Wow.
was a closeted evangelical fundamentalist husband and father back then at
Yeah.
Christian college in northern Indiana. But it was interesting, as I think back, I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, this is this big, queer affirming album." But I think there have been hints of
Hmm.
your evolution all along, right? So for
Hmm.
people like me, who has been kind of like slowly but surely evolving in my own faith
Hmm.
and sexuality, it's been interesting because you have been too. And so, for
Yeah.
me, I remember listening in 2009 to What Matters More and hearing just that
Right.
little, ooh, there's a little hint right there where you
Hmm.
talk about sexuality. And then
Yeah.
I don't know if you realize this, but in 2010, when you toured with Jennifer Knapp, that was
Hmm.
also this big moment of like, oh, Derek Webb, I think he might be maybe affirming of gay people. And I was in the audience in Kane's Ballroom in Tulsa that very first night. That was the night after she had like come out in The
Yes, that's
Advocate.
right.
And there was this little tiny
That's
group
right.
of people, and I was there with my former wife, and that was such a really meaningful moment for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we have
Anyway,
been together for a long time, and I'm
yeah,
and we've gotten, to be together some, and but I have been such an admirer of yours too, though, and the way that you show up on social media and the way that you create space in every way that you can for people to feel less alone in
yeah,
in the lived experiences of their lives, and so I'm just as grateful to get to talk to you at this point. I hope we have many more
right,
in-person hangs in our future,
right.
and we can do get into more trouble together, but
Well, let's talk about the album. Tell me,
sure.
like, why now? Why this moment to come out with
Right.
you've been little by little, I think, coming more and more, like with the Flamy Grant stuff. I mean, it's been obvious to me that you've been a
Yes.
huge ally of the queer community. We're grateful for that. But why now this full-length album?
Right.
Yeah, talk a
Yeah,
little bit
yeah,
about
yeah.
that.
Yeah, yeah, and I appreciate your listening and paying attention
Hmm.
and noticing some of that. I it has, for anyone who knows me very well or who has been following very much and has been listening to the records and paying some kind of attention.
Right,
um Survival Songs will have been no surprise,
right.
as you said. But so let me say it like this: it was probably most of last year, 2024, and at least the first, let's say, month of this year, 2025. I did not know how to do my job. I have
Mm,
often considered my job, and if other creative folks like this language and want to try it out and for themselves and see how it feels, then I invite you to. But I've often thought of the job description of a creative person is to look
yeah,
at the world and describe it. Just
right.
tell us what you see. Look at the world, tell us what you see. That's the job. And I
Yeah,
like that it holds space for things to change. I am, as I describe the world, I'm always changing. The world that I'm describing, always changing. It's a constant variables on every side. And so it leaves room to come into new information and to change our opinions and to write
yes.
things that that we might have disagreed with just a few years
Mm,
ago and things like that. I think that's good. I think that's healthy. So anyway, I, at the beginning of this year, had no idea, and I had been frustrated and really kind of stuck for a while looking at the world with no idea how to describe it. I
mm,
just didn't know what to say about it, and I so desperately wanted to. I wanted to contribute something, I've kind of like likened it a little bit to like that moment that you're driving down the highway and the serpentine belt on your car breaks, and suddenly every gauge just lights up, and
mm,
it's just that all hell's breaking loose, and
yeah,
there's just a fire in every direction you look. Something's on fire, and
yeah,
you need to start running, and you need to do something about it, towards something, and it can be paralyzing to know what to do and where to start. And for me, I think that's what I was feeling. I'm used to and comfortable with the language of protest. I've written more than a handful of protest songs in my
Yep.
time, but I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do, and so what happened was there was a point. There was a point at which I realized, and if this is helpful, I hope this is maybe helpful for anyone who's been feeling this way, looking at the world the last handful of years, wanting desperately to do something and contribute something and not having any idea which way to go. I realized that like what I needed to focus on and look at was what for me personally is the tallest fire, the
Mm,
one that I cannot see past, that I
mm,
must bring low to even be able to get past to anything else and help with anything else. What is the tallest fire that I can see for me personally? And I can tell you that while I do absolutely think we need entire albums about women's rights and the history of women's rights and what's happening to women in this country right now, we need entire albums about what's happening in Palestine. We need entire albums about what's happening in marginalized communities, to people of color, to, I mean, it's like there are, we need albums. We need soundtrack
yes.
to every bit of this. But for me, the tallest fire was looking, and my sweet dog is going to be barking a little bit. That's going to be a feature of our conversation, as it often is around this house. Um, for me, the tallest fire and the biggest emergency for me was seeing the way that queer folks and especially queer youth
Yeah.
were being treated and squeezed,
Mm,
and the pressure that was being put on especially queer youth. Very lives are hanging in the balance. Lives are hanging in the
yeah.
balance. And seeing the way that not just the church now, which has been a fixture unfortunately for decades, but now even the government too,
Yeah.
is both denying your existence and weaponizing you against
Yes.
both yourself and the rest of culture.
Mm,
It's just, and using people. And so as I was observing this, once I realized, oh, that, because that for me is deeply personal.
yeah.
My loved ones, my family members, my community, my best friends, are at the business end of all this, and lives are at stake. And so for me, once I realized it, it's like I knew exactly what to do. And once I gave just the tiniest bit of energy to this focus, this album, it's actually the fastest I've ever written and
Mm,
recorded an album in 30 something years.
mm,
At the beginning of February, I had nothing. I had no idea yet what I was going to do or what it might be about. I thought maybe second half of the year I'll try to write a record when I can figure all this out. And once it crystallized for me, and I knew where I could contribute and what might be meaningful for me to say and to do. That is literally, I wrote and recorded this entire album in like 3 weeks.
wow.
I mean, from inception of the first line to master was like
Mm,
3 weeks,
mm,
because it was such an emergency.
yeah.
The urgency has been, and then as soon as I could get it out, and now it just came out a couple weeks ago, and I literally start shows. We're talking on a Monday. I start shows on Thursday. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
there's such an urgency to it, and that's it for me. That's
Mm,
how we got here.
mhm. What's the reception been like? What are you hearing from people as you're now releasing it out into the world?
Yeah. Well, thanks in no small part to you and many of my other friends and folks online and people. Now is the part where I'm trying to steward it and just
Right.
hopefully get it out to where anyone who might be helped by it can find it and even knows about it. That's the real challenge of also the world in 2025. But other if we set aside, and people like you and I have to always set aside all the predictable responses from
Of
all the
course.
predictable sources. If we
Yeah.
set all that aside,
Hmm.
because there's no new information there, I have actually been so encouraged to hear from uh, both friends and people who've just messaged me randomly, um, that the songs are resonating and that
Hmm.
the language is resonating. Part of how I got here, what I want to say right now is that like as soon as I knew I was going to be doing this work, and I was starting to write just those first few songs, I immediately did some outreach to my friends and some artists, mostly artists, but also just writers and folks in the queer community who are heroes and who are colleagues and who are friends. And I asked them, I explained to them what I'm trying to do. I'm
Yeah.
trying to make these songs. I'm trying to write some soundtrack as a straight white cisgender ally for my friends, my family. I'm trying to write these songs, soundtrack to help empower and encourage. Where do I start? What should I write? What is needed? And specifically, what would you, I was asking my friends, what would
Hmm.
you say to your adolescent younger self in
Yeah.
a moment like this to help you survive it
Mm.
and to get through it? What might that tiny bit of encouragement, if you could grab yourself by the shoulders just for a second, what would you say? And my friends started to send me these incredible messages back. And so much of that language and guidance
Mm.
went into the lyrics on this album, and some of it was so moving to me that I went back to them and I asked them, like, could you take just one more moment for me, grab your phone, hit record, and could you speak that? Could you use your
Mm.
voice to say that to your younger self? And I don't even know what I might do with it, but I'm so moved by what you wrote. Could I use that recording of you saying this language? And I did. I thought the record was done, and I added one last song. I thought, 41 minutes I might be able to get of someone's attention and time and life. And in that time, what might I want to say? Rather than ending it with some clever poetry, I thought the way I want to end our time together would just be with an onslaught of language and phrases and words of affirmation. And so
Yeah.
I did wind up taking all these recordings that all my friends gave me and stitching them together in the
Mm.
last song on the album, and that's how we leave it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but so that's been tremendous, just to know that my friends were vulnerable enough with me to tell me the things that they really needed, and I was able to write those things into some of these lyrics, and then just as an ally, the things that seemed instinctive to me to say, and the real feelings I have had, that it seems to be landing. And that has been incredibly encouraging. That's all I needed to be successful with this, was to know that it was getting through and that it was resonating.
Yeah.
Because this is the first time, weirdly, in 25 years as a solo artist, another 10 years before that, 35 years doing this job, writing songs, that the primary audience for this album is not me.
Mm.
And it's not it's the first time I've ever made a record that I am kind of a secondary demographic for. It's
Right.
really for people who I'm not fundamentally, I am fundamentally like, but we have
Hmm.
different lived experiences because of
Right.
who we are, and our identities, and the way that we have been able to, or not been able to, express those identities. And so to hear that it's landing with those
Mm.
folks has been very encouraging to me. That was a long
Yeah.
way to say something simple, but that's what I felt, and that's what's meant the most.
Hmm. Yeah. That's, I wanted to ask that question, knowing that you are not queer, you're a cis straight man.
Yes.
Did you have some trepidation going into just even this idea of wanting to write this album?
Yes, of course I did. And
Yeah.
and 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 that's where I have leaned on my friends and the
Hmm.
people who are in my life. I went directly. I mean, I can't tell you how much, like, Flamey Grant is, I know you know Flamey, and
Yeah.
Flamey is a very is a dear friend of mine, and we've spent time on the road, and we've been
Hmm.
friends for years. And Flamey has given me so many gifts. And among those gifts, when we were on tour together, maybe last year on the End of Days tour, the time that, the 10-hour drives that we got to do together, over months, um, you know, that gave me a safe place
Mm.
to ask my
Yeah.
friend, like, as an ally, what's not helpful that I
Hmm.
might be doing? Because I'm the type, my energy is that I am all enthusiasm
Yeah.
and little preparation sometimes. And so I run in, and oftentimes with allies, you run in to help, and what you're doing is doing more harm than good often.
Mm.
and
Mm.
and and so it's the humility of knowing and leading, in going into the experience of trying to make a record like this, knowing that this is not my fight to lead. I don't lead here. I follow. I
Mm.
learn, I listen, I follow, and I come up in support of and lock arms with my friends, my family in this community. But I I am a, a, you know a chosen family adoption into this space. I'm brought in by my friends and my organic relationships, and I listen to them, and I take their lead and their guidance on
Mm,
how to even approach this. And I never want to. The last thing, and I see, and I have done this, and I see friends who care a lot and want to be allies. I see them doing this a lot, where what you're doing does tend to it's like accidentally more performative,
mhm,
and it's accidentally doing a lot more harm than good, because
mm,
you're not asking and listening, like, what is it that you even need from me? What
mhm,
you might just need me to back up and shut up and give space and hold space.
mhm. Yeah.
um and so I was very concerned about that, because I do not
Mm,
want to invest my work time and my professional life into doing something that could in any way harm
yeah.
people who I so deeply care about. you know. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was a lot of sensitivity for me going in. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. And I will say that this, I mean, the album feels to me just deeply authentic, and it
Mm,
feels, and like I think I was trying to express at the beginning of this conversation, like I have felt your allyship over the years. This feels like the
mm.
fruition of something coming to,
Yes.
uh, coming to fruition
Yes.
over
Yes.
a long period of time.
Right.
And we've seen that growth over the years. I think I can
Yes.
say that I've
I
seen
so
that.
appreciate,
You
yeah, I
know?
so appreciate you saying that. And and it is true with something like this. It's an odd, like, it's not an obvious story or narrative. I
Hmm.
continue to be very complicated. I've had somebody recently ask me, like, how, if I'm in a new public space of people, how do I, like, explain myself? Like,
Mm,
what do I
mm,
say about myself to explain
right.
how I got here and what I'm doing? And it gets more complicated every year.
Mm, yeah.
But this is the kind of thing, a record like this and a moment like this, where I would step, I mean, into space that's really not my space. It's not my space. And to go into it and try to bring the blessing of friends and the guidance of
Mm,
friends and the leadership of friends and relationships, to bring that, to try to come in with that, and with some humility. um you know it's um it's not a thing you do all of a sudden. It's not, it's like a prize fight. You win it in the preparation and not in the ring. And so,
mm,
I've wanted, like, I might have wanted to have done something like this years ago, and
hmm.
I shouldn't have, because I
Right.
wouldn't have understood what was valuable for me to contribute at that time.
Right. Yeah.
And I feel
That
like I know
makes
a
a lot of
little more
sense.
now.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. You couldn't have known back then, but now,
Right.
all this time later, and after all these relationships with queer people and having these
Yes.
kind of authentic conversations after all these years, yeah,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
totally makes sense.
And that's, and I've had some people ask me about, like, kind of allyship, because
Hmm.
that's the space that I'm in,
Hmm.
and I take up as much of it as I can at all times in terms of being an ally to the queer community. But and they've asked me, like, what's guidance for other folks who wish to be allied to this community. And I just tell them, like, you need to lean on the organic friendships and relationships with queer people and trans people
Yeah.
in your life. And
Yeah.
if you don't have those relationships, then you start there. Why don't
Hmm.
you have those
Right.
relationships? Why
Yes.
do people maybe not feel safe with you expressing that part of their vulnerability or their stories, or their, like, what, and if you do have those friends, that's where you start. Go to those friends, go to those safe people for you, and say,
Hmm.
it help me and guide me, in in supporting you. What do you need? What do you not need from me?
Right.
And start with that. Let it start intimately. Let it start in your personal relationships and friendships, and let it
Hmm.
scale if it does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, what you just said is so fascinating. The whole like like if you were to go to queer media today, like if you were to be interviewed by the Advocate, who's Derek Webb? Like you've got this whole like 35-year history
How
of
do I explain this?
how do you explain that is a fascinating conversation we don't have time for, but
All right.
very, very interesting. Just quickly, a couple of the songs have been
Yeah.
so moving to me. I mean, I
Hmm.
think I just wanted to quote a couple of lyrics from Stay Safe. The
Yeah.
one that is the one that is like just captured my heart. And the
Oh,
lyric that says, "I could never love you more than this, whether a daughter or a son, because you're 10 times the man I'll ever be as the woman you've become." That is just gorgeous. I love those lyrics so very much. And it
thank you.
reminded me very much of the Robert De Niro news. Have you been keeping up with this
Yes,
at all? What he
abs of
said,
course.
he says, "I loved and supported Aaron as my son, and now I love and support Aaron as my daughter. I don't know what the big deal is. I love all my children." I
Yes,
just thought that was
yes,
such an interesting, kind of
yes,
newsworthy thing. It's exactly what you're
yes,
saying. I love those
yes.
lyrics so much.
Thank you so much for drawing those out. And I mean,
Yeah,
and that is what it is. And it's like it doesn't really. I think the internet, which is a place devoid of all nuance,
of course.
where everything is reduced and simplified to the point where it's impossible to really give long answers to questions that need long answers. And so we get
Hmm.
into all kinds of mischief trying to oversimplify things that are not simple.
Right.
And I think that the internet and the media and it's just and politicians and everybody makes it complicated, but it's really not that complicated. It is about loving without condition.
Yeah.
It's about loving the people in your life as they show up and as they present themselves and continuing to love them in real time as they continue to, as my great friend Dr. Roberto Shea Spinoza
Mm,
also says, is as they are
yeah.
becoming. That's a present, real time, future thing. You are
Yeah.
becoming all the time, and as the people in your life are becoming, to just show up and to walk with them and to love them without condition. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that that's obviously not simple in practice, but it's not an easy thing to do, but it's not complicated
Mhm.
as an idea. And so that's what it takes, and
Yeah.
it's crazy how radical ideas like that have become.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
And Queer Kid is another favorite of mine too. I just think that's
hmm,
such a fabulous song. And just the idea that, I don't know exactly the line, but like, I guess we're not real. I guess we don't exist. That
right, right.
idea.
Yeah. And so that's a song. Queer Kid opens up the album, and it's a song that I wrote after a literal conversation that I had with a loved one about their first day back to high school
Mm,
after the morning after Trump was reelected.
mm,
And how did the world feel that day? And how did they feel? And how did their friends all feel? And yeah, they were
mm.
having these conversations, kind of smirking at each other and saying, "Well, I guess we're illegal.
Yep.
I guess we're like just our very breathing in and out is just against the law
Hmm.
now." I mean,
Yep.
it was literally their lived experience right then.
Yeah.
And Yeah, I think the bridge of that song was maybe some of the first language I wrote for the record.
Mm,
I remember literally thinking about specific people in my family and sitting in
yeah.
my car at the Kroger parking lot
Mm,
trying to go in and get groceries and just so overwhelmed with the feeling that I just sat there and just frantically typed out that whole kind of stream of consciousness
yes.
bridge that ends that song was some of the first things I wrote. And I was just like
Mm,
frantically, and I wrote that whole thing and then wrote the words like "queer kid, where can you even live now? Like
yeah.
where are you going to live? Where are you going to go?
Hmm.
Like you're being squeezed out of everywhere, like
Yeah.
what are you going to do? Like, and so and it was out of that concern and fear that some of that spark of creativity I think first started, with some of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. I realize that our time is coming to an
Oh no, no, it's
end.
fine. I would talk to you all day.
Oh, well, yeah, that whole idea of, that we just don't exist. I get that almost every day on Twitter. People will
Right.
be like, "There's no such thing as a gay Christian," and I'm like, "Well, that's odd because here I am, and I have been
Right.
for so very long." I love that whole idea that, you just don't exist, and that's what
Right.
they want to do. They want to just write us out of existence. Things that are
Right.
complicated or difficult to understand, it's
Of
just easier
course.
to ignore.
Of
And I
course.
remember
And you know
that.
what? That's some of that language actually, who I really learned that from was Jen Knapp.
Mm-hmm.
Who I know you know as well. And
Yeah.
Jen has been such a pioneer, really,
Hmm.
a thought leader
Yes.
in the space in many spaces. And but when Jen first came back on the scene and moved back to the States and kind of start to make music again, and she and I think the first touring that she did, having come back before she was even putting new music out, was we did together. We jumped in a van together with another indie artist named Amy Kortz, who's still a
Yep.
great friend and a great
Well, she's a
advocate.
pastor
And
now, I believe, right? Like a
yes, she
priest,
is.
which is
She
cool.
yes, she's amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we were in a van together, and I was watching Jen publicly do what she had resisted doing for so long, which was finally deciding to kind of publicly own her identity in a
Yeah.
way that
Hmm.
had so squeezed her that she felt emotionally no choice but to leave not only the
Yeah.
Christian music industry but the country and live overseas for years. And she came back and decided, this is my work and I'm going to do it. And I remember hearing overhearing her talk to people about this, and I've overheard her a lot over the years say these things, and I've learned so much of this language from her, where people would basically say,
Yeah.
explain
Yeah.
yourself, that
Yeah.
you're saying that you are this, but like you're a Christian and you follow Jesus, and yet you're same-sex attracted, or
Uh-huh. Ugh.
whatever they want to say, and like,
Yeah.
explain this to me.
Yes.
And Jen would say, you know what, like, it's not it's not really my job to explain myself or give an explanation of how I got here. And my job is to take up this space, to occupy all, and to bring
Hmm.
all the full complexity of who I am to bear in the
Hmm.
world, and to hold all that in my physical body. You're arguing with my physical body, like with my the physical space I take up in the world is what you're arguing with.
Yeah.
I'm not here to explain myself to you. I'm just here to show you that I'm real. Like Bigfoot has just walked out of the forest
Mm.
and I'm a unicorn. Here I am. I
Yeah.
mean, if you
Yeah.
say I'm not real,
Hmm.
I'm not I don't need to give you a theological argument for why I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah.
Like, I just do exist. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
even I don't maybe understand it completely,
Right.
and I don't need to
Right.
explain it to you.
Right. Yes.
You just have to contend with the fact that I am physically
Hmm.
here now.
Hmm.
What are you? If you need to categorize me in some way, and that puts your brain in a knot, have at it.
Yeah.
But like, that's not my problem.
Hmm.
I'm not a problem for anybody but you.
Right. Right.
Like, go sort me out if you need to. But
Yeah.
like, here I'm all these things. It all
Yeah.
belongs. And I've just loved that
Mm.
about the way she has
Hmm.
been, moved in the world, and what I've seen of her. And I've learned so much. Hearing you say it just reminded me
Yeah.
of Jen so much, because
Yeah.
that's who I've learned so much of it from. And
Gosh, that just took me back. I'll say one more thing here
yeah,
quickly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
As we're talking about queer kids, especially, and this kind of pertains to the church in particular.
Yeah.
I remember right before I came out of the closet, I was at this evangelical church, and I was kind of as we often are, I was kind of the more outspoken liberal who was pushing for gay inclusion in our church
Yes.
before I myself came out.
Right.
And I was talking to the youth minister, and he was talking about one of our college kids who had just come out, and he was saying he better know his Bible, he better know why, he better have an answer, he better whatever. He was talking to me about this, and I remember thinking to myself, that is not his job. That is not like, and it has caused me so much over the years to think about how we put this burden on our teenagers, on especially in evangelical churches. We
Mm,
put this on our teenagers, on our college kids, to be Hebrew and Greek scholars, to be experts in sexuality, to know, why, to be able to reconcile. We pull out these Matthew Vines books, and we're like, you better know the answers. You better be able to explain this to your grandma,
right.
to the pastor.
Right.
We, the adults in their lives, we need to be able to hold that for them. What
Right.
kind of a world would it be if we could just like let kids be kids? Let them be
Yes.
healthy kids. Let them go
Right.
to prom with the kid that they like. Let them,
Right.
like just celebrate and support them. Let them be
Right.
healthy kids. I just
Right.
dream of that day.
And even as adults, you don't have to make any sense.
No, no,
It doesn't have to make sense.
no.
Like, you don't have to explain yourself, like, there's no burden on you
Mm-mm.
to use other people's language to explain yourself to them.
Right, right.
That is not on you. Like,
Hmm.
if they are going to impose language, and especially very binary language, very rigid language,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
very,
yeah.
like, if they're going to hand you a box of shapes, and you have to put yourself together and explain yourself to them in a way using all of their blocks. Like,
Hmm.
here's the thing, that is not your job.
Right,
That
right.
is their job. If they have some problem believing you exist, and their only response is that you must not,
Yeah.
because they can't conceive of you.
Right. Right. Right.
That is a failure of imagination. That is a
Hmm.
failure of language. That's a failure. That's not your failure.
Yeah.
What you're doing is giving them an opportunity to grow and get more creative and
Mm.
come into better language.
Yeah.
That's what needs to happen.
Hmm.
You don't need to change to fit their boxes and shapes and words. They need to evolve and learn better words and better
Yes.
language and be more creative to be able to receive you and see you
Mm-hmm.
in every bit of your beautiful complexity.
Yeah.
And as you often say, and I love every time I see it, you don't have to worship where you're not wanted. You
That's
don't have to
exactly right.
be, and you don't have to be in conversations where you're not wanted. You don't have to
That's
explain
right.
yourself to people who are
Mm-mm.
not interested.
Mm-mm.
So don't waste your precious energy on folks whose lives are invested in doing nothing but tearing you down and draining your energy. Like,
Yeah.
spend your time with people who love and support and cheer you on, in order to just endure the world where there are going to be people flanking on every side who are trying to tear you down and are
Yeah.
trying to tell you you don't exist and tell you that you're illegal and tell you that
Mm.
these are other people's problems. These are not your
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you for the album. Thanks for the opportunity to talk today. That affirmations at the end speaks to me, even as a 53-year-old man. I can put that on
Yeah.
my headphones and like it's healing the inner child who is still wounded,
Yeah.
still traumatized
I listen to
sometimes,
it, and it's and
Yeah.
the language is good for me.
Hmm.
It's I hope that people will listen to it, and I hope that even if none of this is your lived experience or background, I do hope you'll listen
Yeah.
and maybe just realize how much more emotionally you do have in common with people who you
Mm.
might think are completely different than you. They're not.
Yes. Yes.
We have hearts. We're people with blood running
Mm.
through our veins. And we all feel grief. And we're all struggling to figure ourselves out and to show up authentically in the world.
Mm.
It doesn't take, there's a lot of different ways that you might express yourself in the world, and you could resonate with these feelings. And it would be maybe the best thing in the world for you to realize that you have much more in common with the queer community
Mm.
than you ever dreamed that you did,
Yes.
because these are fundamental human feelings and struggles that we are talking about when it
Hmm.
comes to the ability to be your authentic self in the world and bring that to bear in the space you occupy in your community.
Yeah.
There are just some people who do not have the privilege of being welcomed with there are certain complexities that are just welcomed and preferred and privileged, and
Yeah.
other complexities that are not.
Mm.
That's what we're talking about. But it's hard for everybody. And understand yourself in this struggle, and you might realize you have more in common than you thought, with people who are less different than you thought.
Yeah.
And might that be a good thing? So.
Yeah, exactly. How can people support you? How can people help get this out
Yeah.
into the world?
Anywhere that you're listening to music, you should be able to find it. Derek Webb is my name, DerekWebb. Survival Songs is the album. You should be able to find it anywhere. Otherwise, I'm just like at Derek Webb everywhere. And so if people want to come to social media, and that would be great. Or people want to come out and see the tour, I'm touring now, and I'm going to be playing shows. All my shows are house show type shows, and so
Mhm.
they're very intimate and they're small, and there's no PA system and there's no lights. It's just us in a room talking about these things, playing the songs, having a shared experience. Sometimes they're in people's basements, sometimes they're in churches, sometimes they're in yoga studios. All kinds of people host these things. But if you want to come out to a show, all those dates are at derekwebb.com. You can learn all that. That'd be great.
Okay, awesome. I'll see you in September in San Francisco.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't
Yay.
wait to see you. You're the best. And thank you for all the work you're doing,
Mm,
and the way that you really put yourself out there at great cost, in order for other folks coming up where you have come from to not feel alone in their lives. I see it and I appreciate it,
mm.
and it's encouraging to me. And so thank you for doing the work you're doing.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, it's a
Absolutely.
privilege. I'm grateful for
It
it.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, Derek.
Yeah. Thank you.